It was a Thursday, nothing out of the ordinary. I was home, scrolling through my phone, just killing time before dinner. My wife, Sarah, hadn't come home yet. She'd texted earlier, saying she had a last-minute work thing at the office. Lately, these so-called work things had become more common, and somehow, they always happened in the evenings when I was home alone. But I didn't think much of it then. After some time, boredom took over, and I decided to tidy up a bit. I'm not exactly a clean freak, but Sarah's side of the bathroom was a disaster, half-empty lotions, makeup scattered everywhere, just a mess. As I started organizing her stuff, I accidentally knocked over a few bottles. That's when I saw it. A pack of birth control pills, tucked away behind some shampoo. Now, here's the thing. Sarah had been off birth control for over a year. She told me she wanted to stop taking them to be more natural, and I didn't question it. So, why were these here? My first thought was that they were old, maybe forgotten, but something felt off. I picked them up and checked the date. Fresh. The pills were new, meaning she had been taking them recently. In that moment, my heart dropped. A cold feeling crept into my chest, and I couldn't shake it. Why would she be on birth control now? I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was overreacting, but the thought stuck. It was hard to ignore the other signs. Her late nights, how distant she'd become, the way she'd often say she was tired or stressed. Deep down, I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to face it yet. Just as I was about to put the pills back, I heard the front door open. Sarah was home. My mind raced, but I stayed calm. I needed to figure this out before making any accusations. I put the pills back where I found them and walked downstairs, greeting her like everything was fine. But nothing felt fine anymore. As I walked downstairs, I could hear Sarah bustling around in the kitchen, acting like it was just another normal evening. She was humming one of those cheerful tunes she always played when she was in a good mood, like she didn't have a care in the world. When I stepped into the kitchen, there she was, fresh from a shower, her hair still damp, glowing in a way that didn't quite sit right with me. It was like she'd had the best day ever, not just another long workday. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to act casual, but my stomach was in knots. "How was your day?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though I was burning with questions I wasn't ready to unleash. She didn't even look up at me, too busy chopping vegetables for dinner. "Busy," she said, her tone light, almost breezy. "Super exhausting. You know how it is." Yeah, I knew all too well. Lately, everything was busy and exhausting, and it was starting to feel like more than just work. My eyes drifted to her phone on the counter. It kept lighting up with notifications, buzzing every few seconds. She didn't even glance at it, which was weird for her. Normally, she was glued to her phone. I stepped a little closer, trying not to seem too suspicious. "Your phone's been going off non-stop," I said, nodding toward it. "Is it something important?" She glanced at it briefly, shrugged, and turned back to her chopping. "Oh, just work emails. I'll check them later." Her voice was casual, too casual. The whole scene felt like a performance, like she was trying to sell me this version of her day, hoping I'd buy into it. But all I could think about were those birth control pills upstairs. I decided to push a little, test the waters. "How's that new guy at work?" "Nathan, right?" I asked, tossing the name out like I wasn't already suspicious. She'd mentioned him a few times before, the new guy on her team. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now, everything seemed connected. Her knife paused for just a second, a slight tension in her fingers. Then she quickly recovered, too quickly. "Oh, Nathan? Yeah, he's fine. Still learning the ropes," she said, her tone a little too smooth, turning back to her cutting board as if nothing had happened. I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter, watching her closely. "You've been working late a lot lately," I said, keeping my voice even. "Is it because of him? Helping him get settled in?" She hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but I caught it. Then she shrugged. "Yeah, sort of. It's just, there's a lot going on right now, with deadlines and all. You know how it is." She kept repeating that phrase, "You know how it is," like saying it enough times would make me stop asking questions. I nodded, playing along for now, but inside, I was boiling. The more she talked, the more convinced I became that something was very, very wrong. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I grabbed a drink from the fridge, cracking open the can and taking a long sip, trying to stay calm. I knew I needed more proof before I could accuse her of anything. But I wasn't going to let this slide either. Not by a long shot. "You got plans tomorrow?" I asked casually, watching her carefully. "Probably another late night at the office," she said, rolling her eyes as if she was so over it. And that's when I made my decision. Tomorrow I was going to follow her. I needed answers, and one way or another, I was going to get them. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those damn birth control pills and replayed the entire conversation with Sarah over and over again. Her dismissive attitude, the way she brushed off every question, and that fake cheerfulness, it all felt wrong. I was lying there next to her, but it was like there was this massive distance between us, an invisible wall that I hadn't noticed until now. Morning came, and Sarah woke up early, already rushing around the house like she had somewhere important to be. She barely said 2 words to me, just a quick peck on the cheek before grabbing her bag and heading out the door. She was out of the house so fast it was like she couldn't wait to get away. I waited for about 10 minutes after she left, my heart pounding the whole time, and then I grabbed my keys and headed out too. I had no idea if she'd spot me or if I'd mess this whole thing up, but I was careful. I stayed back, following her car as she drove. At first, she was heading in the general direction of her office, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I was just being paranoid. But then she took a turn, one that didn't lead to work. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I watched her make her way toward a different part of the city, a trendy area filled with cafes, bars, and boutique shops. It wasn't a place where people went to work. It was the kind of spot where you'd meet someone for drinks or a casual brunch. I parked a block away from where she pulled in, keeping my distance but with a clear view of the building. I sat there, my hands shaking, my heart thundering in my chest. She stepped out of her car, dressed way too nice for a regular day at the office, heels, a tight skirt, and a blouse I hadn't seen her wear before. My gut twisted. Something was definitely wrong. And then I saw him. Nathan. The new guy from her office. He was standing by the entrance, waiting for her, and when she walked up to him, they didn't just exchange a friendly greeting. No, this was different. There was a familiarity between them, the kind of closeness you don't have with a coworker. He pulled her into a hug, one of those lingering hugs, too intimate for comfort. I felt frozen in my seat, my worst fears unfolding right in front of me, but it was like I couldn't move, couldn't even think. They disappeared into the building together, leaving me sitting there, staring after them. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to burst through that door, confront them right then and there, but something held me back. I needed to be smart about this. If I was going to confront her, I needed undeniable proof. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. I grabbed my phone and snapped a few photos from a distance. Nothing too close, but enough to show them together, enough to prove what I had just seen. I sat in the car, waiting, my eyes glued to the door. It felt like hours passed, though it was probably less than that, but eventually, they reappeared. This time, they were laughing. She looked so comfortable with him, like they had done this 100 times before. He leaned in close, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle. The sight of it made my stomach churn. They hugged again, and he walked her to her car. This wasn't some innocent work thing. This was something deeper, something that had been going on for longer than I wanted to believe. As she drove off, I followed her home, my mind spinning. By the time she walked through the front door that night, I'd be waiting for her, and there would be no more pretending, no more excuses. This time, she wouldn't get away with it. I got home before Sarah, my heart racing and my mind spiraling with all the possibilities of what was about to go down. I sat there in the living room, the lights off, just waiting. The anticipation was unbearable. Part of me was boiling over with rage, ready to explode the second she walked through the door. But another part of me was strangely calm, like I'd already accepted what I was about to face. A little while later, I heard her car pull up. The front door opened, and she stepped in, completely unaware of the storm she was about to walk into. "Hey babe," she said, all cheery, tossing her purse on the chair and kicking off her heels. "Long day." I stayed silent for a few seconds, watching her from the shadows. She didn't even notice me sitting there at first. When she finally did, she froze, a half-smile still stuck on her face, as if she was waiting for me to say something. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked, her voice now a little unsure. I stood up slowly, flipping on the lamp. The light flooded the room, and I could see the shift in her expression, the confusion, then the hint of nervousness. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her, letting the tension build, letting her feel the weight of whatever was coming next. Then, without a word, I held up my phone. The photos of her and Nathan filled the screen. I watched her eyes go wide, the color draining from her face as she stared at the undeniable proof in front of her. "Long day, huh?" I said, my voice eerily calm. "Tell me, Sarah, which part of your day involved meeting Nathan at a cafe and laughing like you don't have a husband waiting for you at home?" Her face went pale, and for a second, she just stood there, opening her mouth, then closing it again like she couldn't figure out what to say. What are you talking about?" she stammered, trying to regain control of the situation. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I cut her off before she could even finish. "So, meeting him behind my back, hugging him, spending hours together outside of work, that's not what it looks like?" My voice was rising now, the anger I'd been holding back bubbling to the surface. She blinked, clearly caught off guard by how direct I was being. "Listen, it's not like that, I swear. Nathan and I are just friends. I was helping him with a project, that's all it was." I laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh that even surprised me. "Friends? Really? You expect me to believe that?" I stepped closer, pulling out the real kicker, the birth control pills I'd found earlier. Her eyes widened again, this time with unmistakable panic. She knew she was caught. "What are these for, Sarah?" I asked, my voice sharp. "You're not taking them for us, that's for sure." She hesitated for a moment, and for a second, I thought she might actually break down and tell me the truth. But then something shifted in her expression, something defiant. "They fine," she snapped. "Yes, I've been seeing Nathan. But it's not what you think. It's not serious. It just happened. I wasn't sure where things were going between us, you and me. I didn't plan for this." I felt the heat rising in my chest. "You weren't sure where things were going between us? We've been married for 7 years, Sarah. How much more certainty do you need?" She crossed her arms, her posture suddenly defensive. "You don't get it. You've been distant too. You don't notice when I'm upset or when I need something. Nathan, he listened to me. He made me feel appreciated." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. She was actually trying to justify this, to turn it around on me like I was the one who pushed her into Nathan's arms. I couldn't believe the audacity. "Don't you dare try to make this about me," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. "I've been here, every day, trying to make this marriage work. You're the one who's been lying. You're the one sneaking around behind my back." She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't done. "Call it what it is, Sarah. You cheated on me. You betrayed me. And now you're standing here, trying to act like it's my fault." For the first time, she looked rattled, like she was realizing there was no way out of this, no excuse that would make it all go away. The weight of her lies, the betrayal, it all hit me at once, and I knew in that moment, nothing between us would ever be the same again. She stood there, biting her lip, her confidence cracking for the first time since this whole thing started. But instead of apologizing or showing any real remorse, she doubled down. "Okay, fine," she said, her voice colder now. "Yes, I cheated. I won't lie about that anymore." She shrugged as if it wasn't a big deal. Like she was admitting to forgetting to do the laundry, not destroying our marriage. "But maybe if you hadn't been so checked out, I wouldn't have had to." I felt like the ground had just dropped out from under me. Had to? Was she really trying to justify her betrayal by blaming me? My blood was boiling, but instead of yelling, something inside me went cold. It wasn't the loud, explosive kind of anger. It was the quiet, bitter kind that scared even me. "Had to?" I repeated, disbelief thick in my voice. "That's what you're going with? You're standing here, telling me you cheated because of me?" I could barely keep my voice steady. Every word felt like it was clawing its way out of my throat. She rolled her eyes as if I was the one being unreasonable. "You've been distant," she said, her voice hardening. "You come home, barely talk to me. You don't notice me anymore." Nathan, he paid attention. He listened to me. He made me feel alive again. I stared at her, stunned by the level of manipulation she was throwing at me. She was twisting everything, trying to make me feel guilty for something that wasn't my fault. I had been here, day after day, trying to be a good husband, trying to make this life work. Meanwhile, she had been sneaking around, lying to my face every single day. "Don't you dare try to pin this on me," I said, my voice low and cold. "I wasn't the one sneaking around. I wasn't the one lying. You did this, Sarah. You made these choices." Her eyes flashed with anger, and she crossed her arms again, her posture defensive. "You think you're perfect? You think you've done nothing wrong? Maybe if you'd actually been here for me, I wouldn't have looked elsewhere." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like she had rewritten the entire narrative in her head, and now she was trying to convince me that her betrayal was somehow my fault. "You cheated," I said, my voice sharp, every word slicing through the air between us. "You betrayed me. Call it what it is, Sarah. And don't stand here acting like I'm the one who's responsible for your decisions." For the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew there was no talking her way out of this. But then, just as quickly, she put her walls back up. "Maybe we can work through this," she said, her tone softening just a little. "People make mistakes. We've been together for 7 years. You can't just throw that away over one mistake." I laughed, a bitter, broken laugh. "One mistake? Sarah, this wasn't a mistake. This was months of lies. This was you cheating on me while I was here, trusting you. This was you pretending everything was fine while you were sneaking off with Nathan. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." She looked down, her face tightening with frustration, but she didn't say anything. I could tell she was struggling to come up with something, anything, to justify what she had done. But it was too late for that. "I'm done," I said, my voice heavy with finality. "I'm not staying in this marriage. I deserve better than this. You made your choice, Sarah, and now I'm making mine." Her eyes widened, real fear flashing across her face for the first time. "Wait," she said, her voice cracking. "You're leaving? Just like that?" I nodded, not even hesitating. "Yeah, just like that. You already left, Sarah. You left the moment you decided Nathan was worth more than what we had." The room went silent. The weight of my words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She looked at me, searching for some way to pull me back, but it was over. I saw it now, clearer than ever before. There was no saving this. No going back. I turned away from her, grabbing my coat and heading for the door. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking, but I knew this was the right choice. I wasn't going to let her make me feel guilty for wanting more, for deserving better. "Wait," she called out, her voice desperate now. "We can fix this. Please, don't do this." But I was already gone. The door clicked shut behind me, and the night air hit me, sharp and cold. I stood there for a second, just breathing. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't a happy feeling, but it was freeing, like I had finally taken control of my life again. I walked to my car, my mind buzzing with everything that had just happened. 7 years of marriage, and it had all unraveled in a matter of hours. But as painful as it was, I knew this was the first step toward something new. Something that didn't involve lies and betrayal. I got into my car and just sat there for a moment, staring out at the empty street. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I didn't have to look to know it was her. She was probably texting me, trying to convince me to come back, to talk it out. But I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. I pulled out my phone, stared at the screen for a second, and then blocked her number. It was a clean break, and it felt like ripping off a bandage, painful but necessary. As I sat there in my car, everything felt surreal. It wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of everything I thought I knew about my life, about Sarah, about us. 7 years. We had built so much together, and now I was leaving it all behind. But in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about Sarah's betrayal anymore. It was about me finally standing up for myself. It was about not settling for someone who didn't respect or value me. I started the car and pulled away from the house, the place that had once been home but now felt like nothing more than a shell of what we had built. As I drove through the quiet, empty streets, I wasn't sure where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there, in that house, in that life. Not anymore. The road stretched out in front of me, and with every mile I put between myself and that house, I felt a little lighter. The weight of the lies, the deceit, the constant suspicion, it was all starting to lift. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. I ended up at a diner, one of those 24-hour places with flickering neon signs and a handful of night owls scattered in the booths. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to be somewhere that wasn't my car, somewhere that didn't remind me of everything I just walked away from. I slid into a booth in the corner and ordered a cup of coffee. The waitress didn't ask questions. She probably saw guys like me come in all the time, lost, heartbroken, trying to make sense of their lives. I stared out the window at the dark street, sipping the coffee, thinking about how everything had gone so wrong. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the lies. The way she had tried to make me feel like I was the problem, like I had somehow driven her to do what she did. But I wasn't going to carry that burden anymore. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative of what had happened between us. She made her choices and I made mine. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced down at the screen. Another message from Sarah. Please pick up. We need to talk. I'm sorry ***, but I didn't feel anything when I saw her name. No anger, no sadness, just a kind of numb acceptance. Whatever she had to say, it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't going to let her keep pulling me back into her web of lies. I blocked her number without a second thought, setting my phone down on the table and taking another sip of coffee. It was a small act, but it felt like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. There would be no more late-night texts, no more excuses or half-hearted apologies. I was done. Sitting there in that diner, I realized something else, too. I wasn't just walking away from Sarah. I was walking away from the person I had become in that marriage, the man who was willing to overlook all the red flags, who was so afraid of being alone that he let himself believe the lies. I deserved better than that. I deserved better than her. I left a tip on the table and walked back out into the night, the cool air hitting me like a wake-up call. I didn't know where I was going next, but I knew one thing for sure: I was done looking back. Whatever happened from here, it would be on my own terms. As I got into my car and drove away, the weight of everything I'd been carrying for months began to fade. It wasn't all gone, but for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. The road stretched out in front of me, uncertain and unknown, but that was okay. Sometimes, walking away from something broken is the only way to find yourself again. And as I drove through the quiet, empty streets, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't just leaving Sarah behind. I was leaving behind the man who had settled for less than he deserved. The future was unclear, but it was mine. And that was enough. Thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.